My girlfriend of 4 years gave me an ultimatum on New Year's Eve. I gave her my answer at midnight, and it wasn't what either of us expected. I say either of us deliberately, because the truth is, I didn't know what I was going to say until the moment I said it. I had been living with the question of Jess and the question of our future for months, carrying it like something heavy I kept putting down in different corners and picking back up again. And then there I was at 11:47 p.m. on New Year's Eve with 40 people around me and a countdown clock on the wall and Jess looking at me like the answer to everything was something I owed her right now. And I finally understood, in that moment, what the answer actually was. My name is Ethan. I'm 30. I work in urban planning. I am, if I'm being honest with myself, which is something this whole experience forced me to become, a person who takes a long time to make decisions. Not because I'm indecisive, but because I believe decisions matter and I don't want to make them carelessly. Jess interpreted this as avoidance. Maybe, in this case, she was partially right. Jess and I got together when we were 26. She was a primary school teacher with strong opinions about everything from pasta shapes to local politics, and I found that certainty enormously attractive at an age when I was still figuring out what I thought about most things. She was decisive where I deliberated. She was expressive where I was contained. We complemented each other in the way that works beautifully for several years before it occasionally doesn't. The relationship was, by almost any measure, a good one. We traveled together well, which I think tells you more about a couple than almost anything else. We navigated difficult things, a job loss for her, a family illness for me, a period of long distance when I took a short-term placement in another city, with what I'd call genuine partnership. I love Jess. Clearly, completely. That's not in question anywhere in this story. The question, the single fault line running through our 4th year, was the future. Specifically, marriage. Jess had been clear about wanting to get married since around year 2. I had always said I wanted it too. The issue was timing. I had some hesitation, not about Jess, I want to be clear about that, but about something else. Earlier that year, my company had offered me a 2-year placement in Singapore, a career-defining role in a field I'd been working toward for 5 years. When I told Jess about it, her response was immediate and unambiguous. "You're not seriously considering leaving, are you?" I said I was thinking about it. She said, "What about us?" I said, "I'd want you to come." She said, "I can't leave my job. My family is here." And we left it there, unresolved, like a room neither of us wanted to enter. Singapore and marriage had become tangled in my mind in a way I couldn't fully separate. I felt, perhaps unfairly, that accepting the placement and committing to marriage were choices that pointed in different directions. That I was being asked, implicitly, to choose between the life I'd planned and the life that was available. And I hadn't been able to decide. So I'd done what I do. I'd continued to deliberate. The New Year's Eve party was at our friend Dom's place, a rooftop apartment in the kind of location that makes you feel like the city belongs to you when you're up there looking at it. 40 people, fairy lights, a playlist someone had clearly spent real time on, a champagne pyramid that nobody successfully completed. It was a genuinely good party. I'd been having a genuinely good night. Jess and I had been fine during the evening, not the careful, tense fine of a couple managing something, but actually fine. Laughing with friends, a brief slow dance when the music shifted, the kind of easy togetherness that reminds you why you're with someone. I find it difficult to feel like we are actually resolving anything when there's a third person being referenced. Can we try to keep it between us? She looked at me with an expression I can only describe as defensive surprise, like I'd said something unreasonable. She said, "I'm just being honest about my experiences." I said, "I know. I just think James's experiences aren't really relevant to a disagreement between you and me." She changed the subject. Nothing changed. By month 24, I had developed what I can only describe as a James reflex, a small internal brace every time an argument started, waiting for the name to appear. And it always did. He was the phantom in every room we argued in, the absent winner of every contest she staged. Part 3, The Worst Night, minutes 9 to 14. My father had a cardiac event on a Thursday morning. Not a heart attack, a significant arrhythmia event that landed him in the hospital and required monitoring and an overnight stay. My mother called me at work. I left immediately. I spent the next 6 hours in a hospital waiting room, drinking bad coffee, calling my sister, talking to 3 different doctors, filling out forms, and trying to hold my mother together while also holding myself together. At some point in the afternoon, my phone was at 4% and I put it on charge in a corridor socket and forgot to look at it for 2 hours. During those 2 hours, Layla had texted 3 times and called once. I didn't see any of it until I was on my way home. Father stable, situation managed, my own nervous system completely depleted. I came through the door at 8:30. Layla was in the living room. She looked up when I came in and I saw immediately that she had been building something during those hours of not hearing from me, a construction of grievance that had been taking shape all afternoon. Before I could say a word, she said, "You could have texted." I was worried, because I gave him an ultimatum in front of 40 people and he didn't want to lose me in public. That was the story we'd be building a marriage on. 10. 9. The DJ was at the MIC8. I looked at Jess's face and saw, underneath the sad expression, something that broke my heart a little. She was genuinely afraid. This wasn't a power play from someone who felt powerful. This was someone terrified she was being left behind, doing the most extreme thing she could think of to make the uncertainty stop. 7. 6. I understood her. 5. I loved her. 4. And I knew that understanding and loving someone did not always mean giving them what they were asking for in the way they were asking for it. 3. 2. 1. The room erupted. Music, confetti, people kissing and cheering, and the city going off somewhere below us. And I said, quietly enough that only Jess could hear me, in the middle of all of it, "Jess, I love you. And I am not going to propose tonight. Not like this. Because this, what you just did, is the reason I haven't been ready. Not the question of whether I want to marry you, but the question of whether we know how to talk to each other about the hard things without it becoming a performance." She stared at me. I continued, "I need us to have a real conversation. About Singapore. About what we both actually want. Without an audience and without a deadline. If you still want to walk out that door, I won't stop you. But I'm asking you not to." Then I stepped back and gave her the room to decide. Jess didn't walk out. She stood very still for a long moment in the middle of the celebrating room, and then she went to get her coat from the bedroom, and she said goodbye to Dom, and she left. I stayed for another hour, not from cruelty, but because leaving immediately felt like chasing a scene, and I didn't want a scene. The weeks that followed were the hardest of my adult life. Jess and I spoke twice in January. Difficult, honest conversations that went to places we'd been avoiding for years. She told me she'd felt for months like Singapore was me choosing a door-marked exit and calling it opportunity. I told her the ultimatum had confirmed something I'd been afraid to name, that there was a dynamic between us where her anxiety about the future had started to override our ability to talk about it honestly. We were both right. We were both wrong. We were both tired. In February, I accepted the Singapore placement. I told Jess before I told anyone else. She went very quiet and then said, "I think that means we know what we've decided." I said, "I think so." She cried. I cried. We stayed on the phone for a long time without saying much. When we eventually said goodbye, she said, "I want to be angry at you." I said, "I know." She said, "I'm not sure I am, actually." I said, "I know that too." Singapore is a remarkable city. I've been here for 8 months now. The work is genuinely what I hoped it would be, challenging in the ways that develop you rather than just drain you. I live in a flat on the 23rd floor. I've made friends. I've started running in the mornings, which I've never consistently done before. I have, by most available measures, built a life here. The grief of losing Jess took longer than I expected. I thought, wrongly, that because the relationship had been struggling, the loss would feel like relief. It didn't. It felt like loss. I missed her specifically and constantly for the first 3 months. I started therapy here, with a British therapist who works with expats, which turned out to be one of the better decisions of the year. Jess and I have texted a few times, light, civil exchanges. She's well. She's been on a couple of dates, which our mutual friends tell me she's cautiously optimistic about. I'm glad. I genuinely want that for her. She deserves someone who is fully present for the life she wants in the place she wants it. And I wasn't that person, and I think some part of both of us knew it before the countdown ever started. I haven't started anything serious here yet. There's a woman at work, a structural engineer who is funny and kind and has absolutely no patience for anything less than directness, who I've had coffee with twice. I don't know what that is yet. I'm trying not to perform certainty about things I'm not certain of. I'm trying, in general, to be a person who says what he means before midnight forces the question. Ethan's story doesn't have a clean ending, which is maybe why it's the most honest one. It's a story about two people who loved each other and couldn't find a way to have the conversation that might have changed everything until the conversation was already over. About the difference between being ready to commit to a person and being ready to commit to the life they're asking you to build. About what it costs, for both of you, when that difference goes unspoken for too long. The countdown was not the problem. The countdown was just the moment when the problem couldn't be deferred anymore. What would you have done at that midnight? Comment below, I want to know. And subscribe, because next week we have a story that I think is going to hit even harder than this one. Hit that bell icon. We'll see you then. Comment midnight if you've ever been given an ultimatum. And subscribe, because Ethan's update from Singapore is something you need to hear.